Well, good evening everyone. This is my third video. In general, I am interested in culture. That's one of my favorite topics. Why culture? Because it's such a vast topic. But we can, tonight, I am going to concentrate specifically on buildings. Empty buildings. And you are going to ask me, why empty buildings? Because there is a history behind every single building in this country or anywhere in the world, because it tells a story about what happened in that place, about the community. An example would be an empty pub that's been left there for, let's say, quite a while. But why open in that pub? Was it a place where the community would meet? Was it a place where people would make friends? Or if it's an empty building like an old hospital, was it where the walls, let's say, be witnesses of suffering, of human suffering behind those walls? Because each building is telling a story. But what story? What can we find? I think the best person for this topic would be Michael, who's just sat next to me, because that's his interest. He's interested and fascinated by buildings, empty buildings. And I'm sure we can always find something interesting, a piece of history. So Michael, your turn now. So I know, because I've known you for a while now, I know you're interested in empty buildings. And can you tell us why this interest? What attracted you to doing that? Is it hobby for now? But is it something you do on a regular basis? What is it you want to know about empty buildings?
Thanks for your introduction, Roger. I started, you could say, with this, it is more of a hobby around a decade ago. So I was in my late teens then. And I've always had a passion for history, and as a byproduct of that, you could say the culture of the area that you're in, similar to your main topics.
Yes, yeah.
And I believe, as you said in your introduction then, that every place holds memories of the people that were in. If it's just a house, maybe the children were grown up there. Some great memories occurred in that property. In an old asylum or hospital, great suffering would indeed have took place at some point, regardless if it was intentional or not. In other places, you've got where people have met, good holiday, like say an old Pontins camp. People have had great happiness and memories to be gained in an old holiday camp like that. And it's up to people like me to come and track down and preserve that history, and as many of their memories as we can for future generations before they are all wiped off the face of the map in essence. So it's...
Okay,
yes.
that's fantastic. Right, okay, so what are your, let's say, 2 or 3 favorite buildings that have attracted you the most, and why? Because obviously, if they are your favorite buildings, there must be a reason behind it. Okay, so let's say, what's your favorite one?
By far, my top one would be Formby Hall, funnily enough, based in my hometown.
And what is your hometown?
It's Atherton.
Atherton, but you don't live there at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Atherton. Okay, so this is your hometown, so you still live there, and so that's your favorite one. Okay, because obviously then you're attached to your town, you like the culture there, you like the way it functions. So can you tell us more about that building?
Yes, obviously by its name, Formby Hall, it used to be an old civic hall, which in the nature of the venue would be, it hosted many different things. From its original construction date just over a century ago, it would have held pantomimes, weddings, parties of any nature, little festivals. There was concerts held there, many different people, some far more famous than others, but as equally talented. You could say there was evening classes out there. Lots of different memories were created. I would say there was so much variety of things that occurred there. It was by its nature a pub and club. So many people, particularly not just from the town but from neighbouring communities, would all have some memory. Vast majority of them, many happiness would have been gained in that town and in that property. I would safely say that I've got good happy memories from that place. As stated, almost anybody else who's been in the town for more than a few years will remember of it and certainly have good memories themselves. It was a place where anyone could meet. Maybe they met their partners for the future from there.
Yes.
They could met friends old and new. Maybe old work friends, or maybe even old teachers from schools, because we all tend to stick together in a town like that. And you can all reminisce and catch up. You can see things that you probably never would have thought you would have seen. And
so okay, so now what replaces this building, if anything?
well, unfortunately, it was given to the town, but the council decided to sell it off to be replaced with a care home. Unfortunately, in the past years, that's never materialised. It's now just an empty field with a fence around it.
Which is a shame, really, because it's obviously doing nothing.
Yeah, it's just an empty plot of land. It was, without getting into the political side of it, it was somebody else's greed through wanting easy money, but they got rid of that. They thought it was a hub of the community, and what better way than to destroy culture and history than to delete something like people can get together and have great times.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. So something that has been lost because maybe a sports center or a community center could have been built there. So people could have been doing different activities, maybe swimming, table tennis, or dancing, or whatever. To keep the population fit, really. But that time they think it's just there. Yeah. Is it being used at all by dog walkers and stuff like that, or is it just fenced off?
No, it's all completely fenced off now because it's at the side of a football club, funnily enough. But
right. Okay. Yeah.
I think what makes it my favourite explore is simply the fact of not just I've got a personal emotional attachment to it,
Yes.
but the community as a vast majority, if not a whole, as something that is a part of them, what's part of that place.
Yes.
The passion that we did to try and save it was immense, more than anything I've seen in that place ever. Anyone you could ask in the street of a certain age would tell you something that they've seen or they've done in that place. Because it wasn't just a venue for concerts and parties, etc. There was like martial arts clubs, there was little sports things that occurred in the side rooms they had there.
Right.
And there's so much that went on. Everyone has a different story and opinion, and the vast majority of them, I assume, would be very, very good. And it's that kind of history I'd like to capture for future generations that are coming up to know that this is what the people of their elders actually did.
Yes.
And that they're not too dissimilar now. People still go to pubs, and there's many pubs in Everton, but none of them quite seem to hold that legend that the hall did.
Yeah.
Just because of the nature of everyone who could fit in, but it being such a big place.
Right. Okay. So there is obviously an emotional attachment to what you're doing, because that's perfectly understandable. So that's your favorite place, as it were. Now, with regards to the other two favorite places, so I know you mentioned when I was talking to you the other day that you went in a place in Wales.
Yes, it was. I've had a few visits to it over the years. It's only going to get trickier from now on, but it's a place called Denbigh Asylum or Denbigh Hospital in North Wales. Its history backdrop really is predominantly of it being what we used to term a lunatic asylum, or a place to hold anyone that didn't quite fit in with the norm of society at that time.
Yeah, because I mean, mental health at that time was probably taboo.
Very much so.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, so those walls are actually witnesses of human suffering, really.
Oh yeah, far more than what you'd see in most general hospitals today. There's the techniques and experiments that would have gone in a facility like that range from the completely normal to what we use today to try and treat people with illnesses to the absolute ludicrous and things that would never have worked but were just
So
for giggles really for the
yeah.
doctors at the time.
Yeah.
And
So today, people will see that even very close to torture, really.
yeah, very much so. There was even the process of a thing called lobotomy would be most certainly torturous to people these days. It really had very little benefit. It was more so dangerous than anything for the patients that were used upon.
For the patients and stuff like that. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that's really good.
So it can
No,
only
when I say really good, I mean it's really interesting. It's not obviously good what happened there. Okay, so that's very interesting. Yeah, but that's a way actually to learn history at the same time, and I think it's probably a vivid way, in a way, to learn about. When I say that, is to learn about history of a place, of a culture, or what's going on. I mean, I think they could, even schools. I don't know if they do it. I don't even know if they have even thought about it. But taking some kids there, and then understand. So this is what happened in that building, in that old hospital. This is what people used to do, and then most of the time people remember images better as well than just textbooks and what's written. If you go sit to the place, then you can sit, you remember it. And then there is a good chance that you remember that for a very long time in your life, that this is what happened at that in those days. Now things have changed.
Oh yeah, society, not so much culture, but society as a whole has changed. It's modernised. It's both religious and scientific, and the political spectrums have come up.
So when you say so it's changed. So would you say that people in mental hospital these days are better treated to what it used to be? But
I wouldn't say I had the experience to comment on that. I'd say they've certainly got a slightly better quality of life now than it used to be back then. There are still things, especially in the more secure units, that we'll never know about because they're held under secrecy for a reason.
Yeah, but they are unfortunately out there. There are people who are pretty ill, not very good. So then obviously we don't know today. I'm not qualified enough to judge that. Even if I was qualified, I wouldn't judge anyway. But it's give us a glimpse of what really, what's going on in those. Okay, so that's your second favorite place. So what are your third one, would you say, is your favorite, like empty building or empty place? Or
Well, there's quite a few ties for this, and it's not too dissimilar to the second one in the fact that it's so old. It's far older than my original building I told you about. That it arcs back to a different time altogether in our history as a nation.
Yes.
It explains and captures, which is the whole point of my hobby in that sense, how we used to live as a people back then. The good thing, without detracting too much from where we're at now, with Formby, I'll say, was the fact it wasn't touched by any vandals. So when I initially went in, before it was took down,
Yes.
it still had that charm and that look of how I last left it many months earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So I could capture that bit of history for forever,
Yeah.
for the future, and that is my main aim. But we're getting back onto schedule. My third one, it's a tight one, but I reckon St Joseph's Seminary in Village, Wigan would certainly be a good third candidate. By its nature, it used to train priests
Yeah.
for the future from the vicarages, and there is historical stories to that, both good and bad. It's in its nature, it shows you the history of religion back from its day, because it's a very old building. But there is also the most recent revelations of very terrible things that went down there. That might be a story for another time. People can research that if they want to know.
Yeah. So what's this one again? Can you remind?
St Joseph's Seminary.
Oh yeah.
In Wigan.
In Wigan. Yeah. Right.
It harks back to a time many centuries ago. It may not have initially been a building in that usage for that purpose. I can't quite remember myself. I've not fully researched up, but as of the most recent events, there are some terrible things that went down that people really wouldn't want to think about. But that's the kind of, it's not so much that history we're looking to preserve. It's the history of the architecture of the building, because they certainly don't build things like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They just more want to just thump them up. They don't want to have any style. They don't want any structural strength to them.
Yeah.
They don't want any fancy look. Anything now, it's just a multicolour mess. They don't look good at all. There's some passion went into that building. Not a computer made it. It was.
Yeah.
He said, you just let someone have a free roam move that was completely high on drug. Them buildings were stunning, and they last and last and last without even much care. Some of these have been abandoned for many decades and still standing solid.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that what I want to capture. Even so much as say, like now in this town, just capturing the old market hall would have been great before it modified into what it is now.
Yes.
For people of an elder generation to look back, and I could have had just little sentences from them that explain what their emotions were, how they felt of that place, and how they transpire and how they feel about the new property that's there in its place.
Mm.
The exterior of the building might be identical, but the interior is completely changed. And just the fact of, say, an old bus station, that itself can hold memories for people. Did they meet people there?
Mm-hmm.
Did they meet friends? Anything can happen anywhere. And that's what I want to capture, is the backdrop. If you can find articles that have been left behind in places, you get a feel of what used to go on.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives you, even in yourself, a knowledge and a bit of passion to find out more. Try and do history before you get to a place if you can, and you can get a bit more of a feel for the kind of things that used to go down there. Like say if you're exploring an old factory, it used to be people's livelihoods in a sense. They
Yes,
used to go there, they used to have lots of friends there, that's where they made their living. There's a lot of emotion went on there, and places where they shut down all of a sudden. And so everyone would have lost it.
Yeah.
You can feel the pride that went into these old workplaces. And the kind of people, if they've left any artefacts behind, but you can find the kind of people that used to work in them things.
Oh yes.
And the back history of them kind of people, where did they used to live, what was theirs, what was their communities like. And that's what I like to try and preserve for future people, so they know the history of the nation, the different parts of the country that were different from one another.
Oh yes.
Because we might well be one England or one Wales, but the north and south are vastly different in their own cultures.
Oh yes, that's true.
And even from town to town, in that sense, it's...
Oh yeah, that's some of the, actually, when you mentioned that, I mean, from town to town and differences like that. I remember a friend of mine was telling me, you don't necessarily have to go to different countries to see differences in cultures. Within the same country, there are many differences between regions.
Most certainly so, yeah, it is.
Yeah, and then I'm sure that's very true. That's very true, definitely in this country, in the UK, and it's very true too in France. The south of France is so different to the north, to the northwest, in the way people speak, in the way it's just different. And then we have to accept that, even though there is a French culture, but there are, like, let's say, so many subcultures. Yeah.
Well, very much so. Even just in the northwest here, Manchester is very much so a cotton and mining industry. That's more Yorkshire based, but it was very much a factory based society. And as most of the towns around here, you can tell.
Yes.
The big highlights of any structures around here are humongous factories.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still one of the biggest in the world in Bolton.
Yeah.
Just up the road. And well, you only go 30 miles down the road and you've got Liverpool, which, don't get me wrong, it's still got huge warehouses, but it's more of a port. It's more to just seafaring in and out. So it doesn't have that infrastructure and that industry, but it has a totally different one.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore the people that used to work there have a different background, a slightly different society or value.
Yeah.
And they have their own memories. It's not so much, I would like to capture people as well from these generations if possible, where they can explain to you a bit about how they felt whilst they was in these places.
Oh yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, that would be interesting to to do videos or maybe and speak to those people and collect information. I think that's a great way to learn about history, to be honest, rather than just through books and textbooks. Obviously, textbooks are necessary because obviously it provides a base for learning whatever subject you want to learn. But I think at the same time you can make that topic more alive, and more interesting. I mean, some children, for example, who may not give a damn about history, for example, you can perhaps give them the taste of knowing about the past, their past or their culture, where they are, by taking them to different places, whether they're empty buildings, like you mentioned. So it creates a mystery. What happened there? What is it? And we could even just divert a little bit. We could even think about having those kids writing short story about that building. The imagination will keep going, and that's, in my opinion, that's a great way to learn.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Obviously, they might not write a story that will reflect exactly what what really happened, but at the same time, you get the imagination going. So what happened in that old hospital, for example? So they might decide to write. It will be a great activity to get them to write a short story about it, or to illustrate a short story, depending on the age of the children. And then you could do that for So the image thing, I think that, and that will make history interesting.
Yeah, well, because a lot of people don't have an interest in it because it's just page after page after page, and you've got to read and read. And most people don't have that temperament or patience to scroll and scroll and scroll.
But actually, I was like that as a children, as a child. It's okay, no worries. We can have a bit of a wobble. Yeah, that's perfectly human. So as a child, I remember one of my non-favorite topics, I would say, was actually history. I just didn't like it. But now, by just talking to Michael about buildings, I'm starting to think, hang on a minute, what happened in that town, like Wigan? What happened in that place in Wales? What really happened there? What really happened in that building that was built 100 years ago, I think you mentioned? Yeah. And now it's not there anymore, it's just an empty field. Yeah, that's doing nothing. So what happened there? So we got something lost there. But can we keep some of it? Can we capture some of it? So that makes it interesting by doing things like that, to learn about the history of a place, the culture of a place, how people behave, and that kind of thing, rather than just making. So I think as part of the learning process of any topics, in my opinion, is to try to make it interesting, but by activating, is that the right word to use, the imagination of the people who want to know more about that place. So when you go somewhere, what happens? It's a bit like when we watch a film. Why do we watch it? We watch it because we want to know what's going to happen next. We watch it because we want to find out about how the story unfolds.
Oh yes, it's very much like that in my town. Most people would probably switch off pretty quick if you were just saying, oh, it's a building that's 100 years old, and you're just trying to tell a story. Even though they've got a history with it themselves, they're happy to keep that, but they don't want to know it. It's kind of painful for them. Whereas if I can show them and just spark their eye by showing them the pictures and go, do you remember this place? Or a video walking around it all, because they'll remember them exact places in that building. Yes. Even places they probably wouldn't have been backstage, but I wouldn't have been in my time. But luckily, because it closed in that sense, as bad as that is, I got to go in these places. It's not too much at the back, to be fair, but it's still intriguing to see that little back that quite a staff and members of shows would have been. Yeah. And it brings it out, and it's more intriguing for people to sit there and go, bloody hell, look at that. And then they'll have flashbacks of things that happened to them there. Mm-hmm. It'll reignite their memories. And as you say, if something else gets built in its spot eventually, has it improved that area? What is it that they've built? Is there maybe somewhere in the town in the future, as they've promised, a new venue will be built?
Yes.
will it be able to, in its own right, in time, provide similar memories for the new generation?
For the new generation, yeah,
And
I think.
can we try and make it into our own again?
But you know what? I think you would have been a fabulous history teacher, to be honest, because I can feel now when you speak about it, then there is some kind of emotion of it. You want to try to get this building alive again, to make, so the what's the word for it? The spirit of the building,
Oh yeah, to bring its spirit back, to bring the energy of the
yeah,
time.
bring the energy out of it, and then this. And then tell our future generations what is it you can learn from that building. So I think that's a very interesting way to learn about history.
Well, because it inspires particularly the child's nature who maybe has too much energy to just want to, as we all were, especially a young boy, to just sit there and listen to someone talk on, you'd switch up.
Yeah.
But if you saw something in front of you that you could look at and watch and take it in via video,
Yeah.
or go through pictures and go,
Oh,
yeah, I like that. That looks good. I wonder what went on there.
Yeah.
And you might want to, eventually, as you get older, to spread out and go, he's old enough. He's into, say, his late 50s, into his 60s and 70s. What does he have from that era?
Yeah.
Does he have any stories that he can tell that are interesting?
Yeah.
What memories does he have of that place? It's even when you see, like, there's a couple in near Harrogate, little towns up there, where there's a beautiful old abbey in the middle of like a great big forest. I've not been there myself yet, but just the history in itself there of obviously the inhabitants that used to be around there at the time, it's from many hundreds of years ago, so completely change of culture to even we are now in the modern day.
Yeah.
Society values would have been different. Even culture itself may have been slightly different to as it is now, because things evolve over time. And I would like to see a glimpse, even though no one now will be alive from that period, what is the architecture and therefore the historical importance of buildings from that era.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any paperwork I can find and bring that to life through different pictures perhaps, or of anything I can find that dates back to the people of them generations, and what kind of lives did they lead? How much different are they now compared to then?
Oh, yeah.
Because the upper echelons of society might not be too different in the way they work, but what was the kind of lifestyle of the standard person? What the working class person then?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of conditions did they have to live in compared to now?
Compared to now, yeah.
Most people have a decent out roof over their heads. They can have a car, they have access to good food all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You can keep warm, you've got good clothes. What was it like 400 years ago? Most people wouldn't have a clue. They just think, oh, the conditions were terrible. But was it? In certain areas of the country, maybe it was.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
But
And were you ever interested in the mills industry, in the cotton industry, the mills industry in the old days?
oh, I've gained more of that as I've got older. In many years ago, it would have just been that's the kind of industries that my father and his fathers would have worked in.
Yes.
Obviously, it was coming to the end of that time when I was coming into work, so there was no point in me really going into it. It was nice to hear the stories of my family and some of their friends speaking about it, but now it is nice to document things like that down. You can hear the stories of the people they met, the way that the industry worked, how difficult or how easy their jobs was, the different types of jobs within that one building that they had to do, how many people would have worked in them, the society, the little cultures that grew within them buildings, because some of them were that big, they were nearly as big as towns themselves, and they could employ a whole town in some factories. They were that big, and well, villages in that sense. But it's interesting to see what do people still remember and what did they get out of that.
Yeah.
What good times, what bad times did they have? What was the feeling of when they eventually closed as a whole?
Yes.
So it's not just people who gradually left. Because I can just say I could leave my work now and someone asks me how was it like up there, but still people there. It still exists.
But
What's
you can
it
visit, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, you can say you can still visit there, but we'll say Ena Mill in Everton, it's now like a shop, and hopefully the top floors will be residential in the next few years, but what was the history of that place? What used to go on in them floor, each individual floor, what was it based on? What were the kind of people that worked there? And there'll still be people, there is people around now who live in the town still, and it'd be nice to get their insights into what was it like to work in that kind of facility. What kind of life did they lead? What led them to that?
Mm-hmm.
Why did it close? What was their feelings of? And you can still feel sometimes energy if you want to get into that side of things in these buildings. That is a different topic altogether.
Oh, that's also, that would be a topic altogether. We probably could do a video on.
But you can, maybe it's your unconscious when you go in and you've got a backdrop of and backstories, and you make it feel that way.
Right, this has been a fascinating discussion about building empty buildings, what it brings, how we can understand history through empty buildings because of what happened there and what we can feel about it, and how we can pass on that knowledge to our children and future generations. So it's all about culture and history. And so we are going to end the video in a minute or two. So next week I'm going to be doing a video on culture itself, because I gave a speech last night in Birmingham, when I said that would have been on the 23rd of January, 2020. I'm sure we all aware we're in 2020. At the Blue and Orange Theatre, and so I'm going to relate to that speech and how I see culture and the differences across cultures, and how that can be overcome, and what we can do about it, how we can do it. But that's for next week. So I would say good night and sleep tight. Thank you.
Thank you.